Aloha, everybody. Welcome to this week's Gems of the Wisdom Traditions, a conversation circle from the Still and Moving Center. I am Olivia Trice, and I am a staff member at Still and Moving Center, and I'll be filling in for Renee today, moderating. And we have a really wonderful presentation today from Kirk Gradine on the pyramid. I'm really excited to hear from Kirk, and some of our other attendees have also shared that excitement. Kirk is a long time I want to say into architecture and into divine philosophy as well. He's currently working with someone that we know and love at Still and Moving Center, Surya, who is a fantastic copper worker, and I believe they're working together to create a temple in Sri Lanka. Hopefully, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but yeah, I'm really excited to hear from Kirk today, and I will pass this on to him. We are speaking from the symbolic architecture tradition. Does anyone have their almanacs with you? Maybe someone could volunteer to read the back of their almanac.
I could do that.
Oh, Robert, please.
We're in the back.
And while Robert is looking for that, this year's theme is Eyes to the Stars. We will be moving into 2025 very soon, and we do have 2025 almanacs on sale right now for $18. Our theme of 2025 is going to be the light on the path. So if you haven't gotten your almanacs yet, they're available at the Still and Moving Center, and then also on our Boutique E website, so that we can follow along through the upcoming new year. And I'll hand it over to Robert if you have found it.
Yeah.
Excellent. Go.
As long as it's forward. God, send me anywhere. Only go with me. Lay any burden on me. Only sustain me. And sever any tie in my heart, except the tie that binds my heart to yours. If you have men, will only come if they know there is a good road. I don't want them. I want men who will come if there is no road at all. I will go anywhere, provided it be forward. David Livingston.
Thank you so much, Robert. Without further ado, I'm going to pass this on to Kirk. I'll spotlight him and give his presentation on the pyramid. Take it away, Kirk.
Thank you, Olivia. Can everyone see my screen there? Great.
Yes.
So I'm going to open with one of my all-time favorite quotes from Plato, which is only 2 words. God geometrizes. And you've probably all heard this before, and perhaps it even sounds trite, but without question, in the Platonic worldview, we cannot approach the mysteries of the divine or of the spiritual life without being conversant with geometry. And in the Republic, Socrates reiterates the Pythagorean standpoint that, quote, the knowledge at which geometry aims is knowledge of the eternal. When rightly approached, he taught geometry provides the proper foundation for all true education and philosophy, the turning around of the soul from darkness to light, from mere objects and opinions to essences and realities, and ultimately to the contemplation of the Son, the agathon, God, or the good in and of itself. And in making this affirmation, Socrates was not only reiterating the Pythagorean standpoint, but pointing to a universal or perennial tradition I'd like to introduce you to another gentleman, Ananda K. Kumaraswamy, who was a Ceylonese art historian, curator, and brilliant multilingual scholar who deeply studied and wrote about many ancient wisdom traditions, their art and architecture, their commonalities, their uniqueness, and their philosophical underpinnings. And in many of his articles, he examined and explained how all great religious concepts, before they became anthropomorphic, were abstract, geometrical, and numerical. And one of the most ancient examples he gives is from the Rig Veda, which is the oldest sacred text of Hinduism, where Tavastur, a name for the spiritual sun, who is symbolized by an all-luminous circle or platter, gives birth to the cosmos through a triad of divine artists called the Ribus, and by whose emanation is made fourfold. From 1 to 3 to 4 to 7, the sun measures out the metaphysical abodes of cosmic order. And one way to illustrate this is by 3 intersecting planes slicing at right angles one another, and thus slicing through the center lines of the 6 faces of the cube. The 7th is the center point. And this formula gets repeated again and again in different ways throughout Hindu philosophy, and as we'll see, many other traditions. In fact, one can see how even in the Gayatri Mantra, where the threefold AUM gives rise to or encompasses 7 worlds, interwoven spheres or lokas, constituting the entire hidden and visible cosmos. At its most basic level of meaning, the pyramid gives expression to this divine and ineffable process of creative cosmological unfoldment from above below, from the formless silence of the one into the 7 rays, principles or kingdoms of nature, and as and in that way kind of summarizing and briefly referring to the vast hierarchies of beings who make that sacrificial descent possible. It may be regarded as a model of both the divine cosmos and the fully enlightened creative human being, the 5 vertices and the 5 faces also pointing to the self-conscious fusion of macrocosm and microcosm. And this symbolism is not only fundamental to the pyramids of ancient Egypt, but is one of the essential meanings of the Hindu temple, the Buddhist stupa, the Christian cathedral dome, the Islamic mosque, the teepee, and the humble igloo. In fact, to any home or yogi hut, when regarded as a sanctified space for spiritual and moral awakening. That is to say that the geometric progression suggested by the pyramid is found in many, if not all, creation myths and sacred traditions. In Christianity, for example, we have the Trinity of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, as well as the 7 days of creation in Genesis. In the Kabbalistic tree, the higher triad of Kether, the crown, Binah, intelligence, and Chokmah, wisdom, give rise to the 7 Sephiroth, the root archetypes from which all else emerges. In the cosmogony of ancient Greece, the original trinity was Chaos, Gaia, and Eros, while the 7 major gods emerging from them were each associated with one of the sacred planets. And even in some northern Buddhist traditions, as represented in this temple at Mendut in Java, we're given a trinity describing the supreme mind of enlightenment, the triad of Vairochana, Avalokiteshvara, and Vajrapani, symbols of boundless light, universal compassion, and perfected wisdom. Moreover, this threefold symbol of the Buddha nature resides inside a 4-sided pyramidal temple, which only in the 20th century, it was discovered to be in direct linear alignment along an ancient stone paved road with walls on both sides that had been completely overgrown with jungle, leading to or aligning with the most famous of ancient Buddhist pyramids, that of the 10-tiered Borobudur. In the earliest periods of dynastic Egypt, Osiris, Isis, and Thoth was the highest divine trinity. Osiris was associated with the sun, Isis with the moon, and Thoth with Mercury as a symbol of synthesizing wisdom. Osiris also, his another name was Tum or Atum Ra, again as a representation of the sun. Ra was the eye of the sun, was addressed as, quote, the great one of the seven magic forces. And Seshat, who was the wife of Thoth and the divine scribe and the origin of all language, wore a seven-leaved plant as her headdress. And we cannot fail to mention the Pythagorean decad of 10 points. Again, the 3 and the 7, with 4 points on each side, also called the Pythagorean tetractys. It too was revered by the Pythagoreans as a distilled essence or fundamental archetype of unfoldment, applying to all ordered systems, both divine and human. The boundless circle, which is the basis of the geometric construction, was too sacred and therefore was passed over in silence by the Pythagoreans. Briefly put, the point at the apex is the monad, the one. By its inherent fecundity emanates the duad, symbolized by the line, giving birth to the triad, the first and simplest plane figure, the symbol of harmony. But the triangle cannot be constructed without knowing its center point, which finally completes itself by becoming a point outside the plane of the triangle, creating a three-dimensional solid with 4 faces called the tetrad, or which is also aligns with the faces of the cube, representing the utmost differentiation of matter. And in addition, in the Pythagorean tradition, the monochord with the subdivisional ratios of 1 to 2, 2 to 3, and 3 to 4 also provided the first 4 notes of the sevenfold musical scale and illustrated a profound and sacred inherent law of correspondence between number, geometry, and sound. Despite countless claims to the contrary and more than 21 centuries of surveying, study, and speculation, no modern scientist, archaeologist, or online YouTuber can rightfully claim to have fathomed the many enigmatic mysteries of the Great Pyramid at Giza. Despite having been labeled by generations of Egyptologists as the burial place of Pharaoh Khufu in 2560 before the Common Era, no definitive inscriptions or burial remains prove these assertions. And despite many elaborate theories being put forth, no adequate explanation exists as to how over 2,300,000 limestone and granite blocks weighing from 2.2 to the largest weighing 80 tons could have been cut with such precision with copper tools, which is all they had available at the time, transported and lifted with such accuracy into their final place on the pyramid. In fact, we just saw a program the other day which pointed out that if you study the casing stones on the bent pyramid, because that's the one which has the most of them still intact, you can see that there was no way that a ramp was used to put those in place. They had to be begun from the very bottom, and each course had to be completed in order for the next course to be put in place. So all the ramp theories, at least this fellow was asserting it, simply don't hold water. The base of the pyramid covers 13 acres and uses more stone than has been used in all the cathedrals, churches, and chapels built in England since the time of Christ. No two stones of the pyramid are identical, and many are so carefully joined and fitted that a piece of paper cannot be slipped between them. Most of you, I'm sure, know that the entire surface was at one time covered with white, gleaming limestone as a facing. And where they still exist, they exhibit a precision, an optical level of precision in terms of their cutting and placement. And the other factor is that during the day on the sunny side of the pyramid, the site would have been overwhelmingly bright, looking something like this. In fact, it's probably so bright you couldn't look at it if you were this close to it. And, and then, of course, most importantly, the mathematical and geometrical knowledge, the astrophysical and astronomical alignments of the Great Pyramid far surpass the level of knowledge that's attributed to Egypt and is found in any of the papyri or hieroglyphs or any civilization from this period or before. And so we're just going to mention a few of them because there are very many. For one, the design simultaneously celebrates both the phi and pi. Phi is the golden ratio related to the famous Nautilus shell, and pi, of course, is the ratio between the diameter of a circle and its circumference. And one of the many ways in which these ratios are ingeniously combined is illustrated in these two drawings. That if the vertical axis in that upper left drawing, if the vertical axis is assigned a length of 1, then the perimeter of each side, the length of each side is pi over the square root of 2. And then alternately, if each perimeter side is assigned a value of 1, then the area of each triangular face is phi over 4. That is the golden ratio over 4. Oh, I should have mentioned that also with that previous slide. I don't have a drawing that shows it, but that the ratio between the vertical axis and the circumference is also the pi ratio. I just learned this for the first time recently, that the geographical location of the Great Pyramid appears to have been carefully chosen in relation to its latitudinal and longitudinal axis, anticipating the division of the Earth by 360-degree radians. And this was an assertion and discovery made by a researcher, scientist, researcher, and physicist working in Wales. And using modern GPS satellite data, he determined that the center of the base of the pyramid lies just 11 meters south of the speed, what he calls the speed of light latitude. That is, if you take the latitude 29.9792458 and multiply it by, I think it's 10 billion, you get the speed of light. And so the center base of the pyramid is just off that 11 meters from that. How could that possibly be the case that they would have anticipated that knowledge or had that knowledge or anything like it? The King's Chamber, which is, at least as far as we know, the central focus of the pyramid itself, is a perfect double cube and incorporates, again, both the pi and the phi ratios, as well as the 3, 4, and 5 triangle of Pythagoras. And there's a whole bunch of evidence that the Giza pyramids were designed based on a decimal system, that is factors of 10, but that the decimal system is not supposed to have been known to the ancient Egyptians and was not invented until about 2,000 years later in India. And some of the evidence for that is that if you, that exactly 1 billion pyramids placed one on top of the other would reach the height of 92 million miles, which is the distance to the sun. Another one is that the measure in pyramid inches of the perimeter of the Great Pyramid is 36,524.3, which is exactly 100 times the number of days of the sidereal year on the winter solstice in certain epochs, including the one in which current Egyptologists believe the pyramid was built. The site plan proportions oh yeah, so there's the finished perimeter note. The site plan proportions that enclose in a rectangle the three major pyramids of the Giza Plateau have the sides of that enclosing rectangle are the square root of 2 and the square root of 3 times 1,000. Another remarkable feature is that the sum of the diagonals of the pyramid, the Great Pyramid, shows an approximate proportionality to the 26,000 year precessional cycle. And then, like a giant sundial, the measurement of the summer and winter solstice, the moment of noon, the length of the solar year could all be ascertained by the exact dimension of the shadow cast by the Great Pyramid on a very large area that was made perfectly level and which stretched out on the south and west sides of the Great Pyramid. As I mentioned in my talk on the Sphinx, sorry, this is advancing ahead of my talk here. Why is it doing that? Oh, and I'm missing a slide. I mentioned it in my talk on the Sphinx that about 500 miles south of Giza at the temple to Hathor at Dendera, a round zodiacal map was carved into the granite ceiling of that temple. And among other remarkable features, H.P. Blavatsky wrote that it records 3 precessions of the equinoxes, each taking 26,000 years, indicating that Egypt possessed astronomical records extending back at least 78,000 years. And she also points out that a long, narrow passage extending from the king's chamber of the Great Pyramid of Cheops, or of Khufu, those are Cheops is the Greek name for Khufu, once pointed to the pole star, Alpha Draconis. And while it's true that the star would have been in that pole position about 5,000 years ago, it would also have been in that identical position in the previous 2 sidereal cycles. And she says that in combination with the Dendera, that the possibility that the pyramids and the Sphinx are more than 78,000 years old deserves to be considered. In fact, she says that was the reign in which, according to the lineage of kingship given in hieroglyphic accounts, that was when Osiris and Isis reigned as divine king and queen. And she says that the Giza Plateau was no graveyard, but rather a center of initiation, revealing one of the true and ancient origins of the doctrine of crucifixion and resurrection. And I will just close with this quote from her writings. She says, "To crucify before the sun is a phrase used of initiation. It comes from Egypt and primarily from India." Oh, I'm sorry. This is advancing. It's my bad. The enigma can be unriddled only by searching for its key in the mysteries of initiation. The initiated adept who had successfully passed through all the trials was attached, not nailed, but simply tied on a couch in the form of a towel or a tea in Egypt, and plunged into a deep sleep. He was allowed to remain in this state for 3 days and 3 nights during which time his spiritual ego was said to confabulate with the gods, descend into Hades, and do works of charity to the invisible beings, whether souls of men or elemental spirits, his body remaining all the time in a temple or crypt or subterranean cave. In Egypt, it was placed in the sarcophagus in the king's chamber of the pyramid of Cheops and carried during the night of the approaching third day to the entrance of a gallery, where at a certain hour the beams of the rising sun struck full on the face of the entranced candidate, who awoke to be initiated by Osiris and Thoth, the god of wisdom. And that's it. So
Thank you so much, Kirk. That was really insightful. I've heard a lot of different theories about the pyramids. I wonder if you could speak a little bit more about the cultural phenomenons and maybe even mysteries around the pyramids, and not just how it's built, but also how it's maintained.
how it's maintained?
Yeah, because they're very old, and they have been around for so long. I wonder if there's any cultural significance or even architectural significance to its existence now.
Well, undoubtedly, undoubtedly, there is a significance to it. It, from the perspective that Blavatsky offers, which you don't really find articulated anywhere else that I'm aware of, except Plato. In fact, we have that wonderful quote from Hermes, which suggests Plato's perspective, which is for December 12th. It says that Plato saw in the pyramid a symbol of the glorious descending hierarchy of manifesting spirit. The apex of the pyramid represented dynasties of gods, which became eventually dynasties of demigods, the heroes all people celebrate in myth and legend. Finally, as the triangle became the cube, the dynasties became those of men, who were called Raja Rishis, or divine kings. So it's, I think generally, I would venture to say that it not only played critical roles in regards to the planet in the past, but that it is playing hidden roles currently, and is still pointing towards a future day when a regeneration, a true spiritual regeneration of civilizations as a whole, the planet as a whole, can take place. And Blavatsky talks about many locations actually across the planet in which beings who have always been watching over humanity and waiting for those receptive souls who are ready and who have prepared themselves to understand the deeper purposes of human life and contribute to this a cyclic regenerative process that will lead to systems of thought, of social organization, of justice, of political organization, of arts and sciences, all aspects of culture being regenerated at their very root, because they'll have a foundation in universal brotherhood of humanity and of all the kingdoms of nature, that unity that lies behind the whole of nature. But that's just a very general comment on the the visible side. It's the pyramids, and many there are, as far as we know, roughly 70 or so known pyramids in Egypt, and many that could be buried under the sands in various places, along with many other monuments yet to be discovered, I'm sure. But that they play a critical role to local Egyptian culture because of their, the attraction of tourists, millions of people visiting them every year. And but it's a strange thing that's also happened in regards to the deeper study of various aspects, that it's sort of like a closed door where the Egyptian government does it's very difficult to get into allowed to do independent research. But they recently, I think it was in 2016 or so, there was a group of a cross-disciplinary group of scientists and researchers who brought in a high-tech equipment to take these photographs and tried to determine basically using cosmic rays and plates that are set in the deeper portions of the pyramid, to see if there were any cavities or other structures within the pyramid that hadn't yet been uncovered. And indeed, they did find at least two large areas in which some form of cavity construction, formal structure, at least as big as what has already known within the pyramid, it does occur, but they haven't yet. This is just very recent. This is in the last 3 or 4 years, and they haven't made any excavations into the pyramid, because you can understand how trying to actually penetrate into the pyramid, unless you find an actual passage, you're having to destroy rock and remove rock, and it's also very dangerous, and that you can understand how a government would want to protect that and not allow that to go on. So, yeah, I'm sure there's more to be discovered about it. But Cliff has his hands up. May he have a comment about this, Cliff?
I guess I have another kind of question about it all. I mean, what you presented, Kirk, is just so radically different and so mysterious compared to what most of us grew up with about, these pyramids, being mainly tombs, sepulchers, and also built by forced labor, mainly by slaves. And, I'm a contractor, and I mean, the way the pictures you showed of the finished product, with the limestone and everything. I mean, there's no way you're going to get a product like that without an inspired workforce. You're not going to get it by the whip. You're not going to get something like that through that kind of brutal way of getting things done, with cutting stone, with chisels and pulling them with ropes, and like you're saying, the whole ramp idea doesn't work. So I mean, just from a pragmatic contractor point of view, that's not how it got built. But the question I'm kind of wondering about is, I was really captivated by this phrase from Plato that you had at the beginning about the turning around of the soul. And I was wondering what that means, and how this sacred geometry and these pyramids would be involved in this kind of mystery. These mystery schools, these places of initiation, would be involved in helping a culture of human beings, a society, reorient the soul. Can you answer something about that? And say some more about why we completely have it wrong about these pyramids.
Oh boy, yeah. Well, it seems like you asked 4 or 5 questions there, but maybe I'll just pick one. Why do we have it completely wrong? Well, one big reason is that, and I started to write about this, and then it gets too long. And there's of course no way to do a proper presentation in 20 minutes really on this theme, but back in the 16 and 1700s, there were various historians, archaeologists, scholars who began to formulate a theory about progress of evolution and the progress of humanity. And except with a few rare exceptions, they ended up kind of conforming to a Darwinian perspective. That is, we evolved from monkeys. We were swinging from trees, and suddenly, at some point, human intelligence began to flower. We developed more sophisticated forms of language, the use of tools. The brain shifted. Became more upright, etc. But that is and so the whole progress of the development of tools and of capacity for building the levels of knowledge, etc., the sophistication of language and of writing, all of that now largely conforms to that Darwinian viewpoint in terms of the progress of development of civilization. And if there's evidence that's found that contradicts that in a huge way, it's simply, it's put aside as a kind of anomaly to be, understood either that it's been faked in some way, there was a mixing of levels of archaeology or whatever. There's some excuse made why it can't actually be considered valid. So in fact, there's a research going on in the last 4 or 5 years in it's a Southeast Asian country now, I'm forgetting, where they discovered there was this big hill and they thought it was a natural hill, but then because of all the overgrowth, they discovered, oh no, it was actually a pyramid. And so they started removing the brush and doing investigation, and then they realized, oh, this is one of the biggest pyramids on Earth. And so just recently they brought in a whole team of people, did years of research, including like geodetic sound studies to try and locate and discover any underground structures, because they didn't want to start tearing everything apart, right? And in fact, they weren't allowed to. But they also did core drillings, got permission to do drillings, and they ended up finding that this is a 20,000-year-old pyramid that has at least 3 chambers in it, deeply buried. And they published, it was a peer-reviewed article that was published 3 or 4 years ago. And now just recently they came back and said, oh, no, we're retracting that. And they're not giving any good reason for it. They're just saying, oh, well, the samples that were taken in the drilling pits they were sampling soil, and that's not conclusive in terms of determining age, which is the standard way for you take the organic material and you carbon date the organic material, and it's stratified by layers, so in a certain layer how old it is by the layer, and they're just throwing out that data because it doesn't fit within the standard model of the evolution of humanity and civilization. That goes on. You see it happening a lot, and so you don't know what to believe. But so that's one answer, I think, about all of that. But yeah, I know you're familiar with Plato, and he talks about ancient civilizations, right? And Blavatsky says, yeah, they far exceeded our capacities in terms of technology. Far exceeded. We're like in baby land still with our technology. And so the idea of having to move huge amounts of stone and to carve them into shape, it's not a big deal for them. Yes, Robert. Margaret wanted to say something about this.
Okay, go ahead, Margaret.
Can't hear you, Margaret.
You have to unmute.
By the way, go ahead.
This has to do with cycles that a yogi named Yukteswar back in the early 1900s talked about. Like, I won't have the numbers exactly right, but 20,000 year cycles, starting with the divine. Another 20,000 years comes down to more dark, solid stuff. Kali Yuga, he called it, and that would be our dark ages in this time. Cycling starting to come up, getting less solid, more, I'll use the term electric. More, I think examples would just be our cell phones, our technology right now. That would be the third cycle. Back up to where we're telepathic, to again to the great divine. And it's like these 20,000 year cycles, and he called them yugas. From the highest, circles down to the lowest, and gradually comes back up. And in the early 1900s, he was saying we're in the one that's not the darkest, but we're just starting to come out of it. And so that makes me think, if that's all right, there are times when things are like we wouldn't think possible now. The other thing I found interesting is the talk about the initiation, the place of initiation, not death and resurrection, but initiation, laying for 3 days or whatever. In a book about the Essenes, called Anna, Grandmother of Jesus, she talks about, through this other person, medium kind of thing, about there being initiation, that all of the, not all, but Jesus and a few others of the Essenes went into these caves or hidden places where nobody knew what they were but them for these initiations. And I just thought that was interesting, just the terminology. And so, yeah, that's all.
One of the things about the mystery schools, as far as we understand them, is that at one time they were an inherent part of the culture. And it was understood that the kind of knowledge that was being given was not only the highest divine form of knowledge, by which one could be of tremendous aid to other beings, whether that's through healing or sciences of various sorts, but that it also required, there were preconditions one had to meet in order to enter the mystery school, and that had to do, it was a great stimulus to virtue, is the way Blavatsky put it. That it became, because it was so prized as a kind of, it's a sacrificial effort, in the same way that in some countries becoming a Buddhist monk would be, the giving up of all worldly possessions and values in order to pursue something that ultimately would be of deeper spiritual benefit. But yeah, so thank you for those comments, Margaret. Robert.
My understanding is that most of the pyramids do not have their capstone like the Great Pyramid. And I think they found about, when I heard they have 4 capstones in museums. But the point is, without the capstone, the sides of the pyramid are not triangles, right? They're trapezoids.
That's true.
But anyway,
yeah.
And then, so you have that problem, and the capstone is unique. It's has various inscriptions and things on it. And also then you have that curiosity that on the dollar bill, you got the pyramid on one side, and then over the pyramid is a triangle with the all-seeing eye.
Yeah.
So I wondered what you had to say about that and the completion of the pyramid.
Yeah. On the dollar bill, is the cap removed also on the pyramid, or is it a full pyramid.
It's hovering over it.
But does it complete itself? Does the pyramid complete itself? Or does it have a missing cap?
Well, I think I can't remember, but
I believe the eye is in the capstone.
The eye is in the capstone. Someone's pulling out a dollar bill there, I can see.
I don't carry cash.
Yeah. See, we've got a trapezoid there too. Yeah.
Yeah, it's over it, hovering over it.
Yeah. Well, um, that whole idea of the divine eye is very deep in Egyptian mythology. You know, the eye of Ra is it's the eye of the sun, but it's also the eye of the logos itself, and it's the whole. It's part of that whole initiatory cycle, apparently. And this is why, like in India, beings who have attained that level of spiritual knowledge are referred to as seers, is because what's been awakened is a faculty in which in which there's direct knowing, direct perception. One is not being told about spiritual realities or spiritual beings and so on. One sees them. One has the direct experience of them. So it's the awakening of what we call intuition, but in a very deep way. Direct cognition. That's the phrase that I really love. And ultimately you get this description in texts on meditation where there's no longer a gap between the perceiver, that which is being perceived, and the process of perception, that the three are unified. And that's where the being also becomes an embodiment of that which they know. It's a fusion of virtue and knowledge to such an extent that it can't be lost because they are it. And but it's that seership. I think that's what the divine eye is representing.
But the
Really,
pyramid's not complete until that divine eye, right?
yeah. Well, I I guess I would take the view that it seems like you're raising the question. Well, the pyramid can't really function unless you rebuild it and put the cap back on. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Well, it's incomplete. Yeah.
Yeah, it's incomplete, and it's for a reason. But is there? I would raise the question. Of course, I don't really know, but is there another plane in which it is complete? And in which because that's the other thing that's said about these beings who initiated these great cycles of higher civilization, right? Is they're consciously immortal. So they change bodies, they change forms, they incarnate again and again from age to age, like the said of Krishna, but without any gap in their awareness or knowledge, and also their knowledge, awareness of humanity and the conditions of humanity. So for them, it's not a problem. It's not an issue. And so whether the form is complete or not on the interior planes, at one level, you could say that it is, and will one day be restored in some way, maybe not in the same way that it took the form it took then, but in another way that will also be deeply meaningful and regenerating to society. That's my way to get around that. It's a good question, though. Yeah, David. David's been patient now.
For sure. Just gonna call on him.
Okay, so my thoughts on this is bifurcated. I'm going to kind of bring it back down to geometry for a moment. If you take a circle as a 2D representation of a sphere and you place an equilateral triangle inside and then another inverted triangle inside, you create that Star of David, right? And those points where it touches, I believe that's at that 29 point something degree point that was in one of your slides in terms of where it lands on the sphere. Um, if you project this model into 3 dimensions, right, you end up with those 2 intersecting tetrahedrons. And
Mhm.
this is the first time in geometry where you get a valence of 0. It has no preference as to directionality, so it's the first approximation of a sphere, which the universe seems to be full of, right? Our
Mhm.
universe is just a bunch of spheres. So understanding the geometry of a sphere seems to be somewhat significant. And I believe that 29.2 degrees is where the star intersects. Now, if you take a sphere and you spin it, something very interesting happens, right? It squishes and it creates this force at those points, which seem to relate to the ring of fire. It seems to be where the Earth and also the sun seem to be extruding a lot of its material. Are you following me so far?
Sort of. I'm
Okay.
not sure where you're headed, though.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. But this slide, I was trying to relate the 29.2, which is where Kilauea is at on the Big Island, at that
Wow.
29.2 degree parallel,
Wow.
where she's oozing. Um, so I was trying to understand your slide. That was one of my thought forms.
Mm. Mm.
The other one is um, from a talk I heard by the same person that was talking about the geometry was, uh, do you think that some some life form, maybe human, maybe pre-human, maybe alien, had the ability to defeat gravity?
Yes.
There seem to be references in the Old Testament about the ark, that Moses was following the ark, that it was powering up under its own power and moving, and the tribe was following the ark. They weren't moving the ark was moving on its own. And apparently there are depictions of this light emanating from the ark, which apparently is quite heavy, lifted and moving, and Moses and the tribe were following the ark along.
Well, I don't know about all of that. But the question you raised, is it possible that there were civilizations in which the knowledge of defying gravity was known, what we call gravity? And I would say, yeah, that seems to be clear. In fact, there's in relation to the Stonehenge, for example, one of the legends that's regarded as a ridiculous myth was that the stones were levitated into place. And that's why I was saying that, when Blavatsky says, well, our technology is like, playthings in relation to what they knew, is because that, and you see this in megalithic structures all over the planet. Um, huge, 1,200-ton megaliths shaped and put into place with exactitude. And and that there's no real explanation about how that could have been done. Sometimes in mountainous regions, like in South America, and so that seems to have been, not really a problem for previous civilizations, and this is why this is really actually very important in terms of how we begin to rethink what is possible for humanity. It's not that there were this whole idea about aliens having visited us from other planets. We have, if you take the doctrine of reincarnation seriously, and this idea that civilization evolves in cycles. So we had very high points of civilization, and we've fallen, and we're beginning to come out again, but we're reincarnating. So did we make big mistakes in the past? You bet we did. We misused our powers. That's the whole story, the Atlantean story. We misused our faculties. And because of that, we're kind of pygmies in relation to what we were before. I mean, that's karma, right? You misuse something, you lose it. And but we're, because of reincarnation, we're being given the opportunity again to rise again, to undo the errors of the past, and to correct. And so that's why, you know, the ethical and moral dimension is so critical. Our science has already outpaced our ethical understanding and sensitivity. We already can destroy far more than we know what to do with. And it's going to continue that way, you know. And where will that be a recentering in terms of, you know, science that is really on behalf of humanity and the aiding the least and the lowest and making sure everyone is included and protecting the planet. You know, we're talking about going off to other planets and we can't, it's because we're trashing our own planet. So anyway, it seems to me there's a fundamental lesson there. Yes, all kinds of technology are possible, but if we haven't learned the fundamental moral lesson, we're just going to, you know, it's going to be self-destruction. So, yeah.
And do you think humans, as we know them, are descendants of the beings that created this technology?
Yeah. Well, that's the way, yes. Uh, Again, if you take the cycle of reincarnation, and if you look at the way Blavatsky speaks about it, very much so. She says, yeah, those distant ancient civilizations, the Atlantean and the Lemurian, which were the ones that preceded them, uh, where all the mysteries of nature were known. There were no secrets that weren't known because humanity was a single family and was working together and was working in harmony with all the kingdoms of nature and also with these great beings who descended from higher regions, not from other planets, but from higher spiritual dimensions, which are deeply involved and always engaged in the evolution of our planet, but who sacrificially, it's the bodhisattvic idea, right? The avataric idea that these beings are waiting for the opportunity to help humanity. And when they can, they descend. And there's a great uplift that occurs as a result of it when humanity is ready. And we've been through these great cycles. We've lived in the divine dynasties ourselves. And probably some of us have soul memories, you know, that pop in from time to time. But again, we're blocked from that knowledge because we've misused it in the past. And just to hunger for it is, you know, it's a downward course because again, uh, we haven't made the fundamental correction, the moral, and it's becoming evident right now today, isn't it? Because we're seeing the dismantling of cultures and societies and governments and institutions, you know, because why? Because there's so much corruption still, and they need to be dismantled. Anyway, sorry about all that.
No, no, don't apologize. I think that was very well spoken. And thank you for expanding on this topic. I do want to leave some time for some gratitudes. We are reaching the top of the hour. And because this was such a fruitful conversation, I'm sure we'll have a lot of them. I know Cliff started off the conversation knowing that he wanted to give off some gratitude. So I'll give it off to Cliff.
Well, I think we're all kind of a little bit blown away by your presentation, Kirk. A lot of it, I think, went over a lot of our heads in a way, but also I think what you were saying is so inspiring as a radically different way of seeing history and seeing who we are and what our potentials are. And just I think it's a lot more, let's just call it fun. It's a lot more fun to live in a world of mystery than a world of, you know, I don't know, truncated kind of stupid ideas like these pyramids are tombs, you know. No, there's something that inscrutable, something else was going on here. And and what you were saying, even though it's radical, it's cohesive. It really holds together every idea that you presented, connected with all the other ideas, and there's a definite cohesiveness about it. One of the things I was thinking about a little bit while you were sharing was my own little journey to India and going to the Ajanta and the Ellora caves. And those were hidden, they were covered over, and no one even knew they existed. And then all of a sudden, I think some soldiers came upon them, and then all of a sudden they started to dig them up. And there was these amazing, amazing places of devotion and so forth. And there was one in particular, this one temple, and the way they made it was they did it from the top down. It was just a hill, and they carved it from the top down and created this amazing structure. And I was just like, how in the heck is that even possible? You know, to be able to just take a mound of earth and start chiseling from the top and then create this amazing temple structure. You know, it was just, as a contractor, it blew my mind. So there's got to be a lot more at work here than the way we want to think of it in terms of just hammering stones, you know, to create a pyramid. I was also, as this idea you spoke of direct cognition, and the fellow that brought the dollar bill up to the screen, and the symbolism of that that we chose to put on the back of the dollar, and the mystery of that. It reminds me of Plato's teachings about the process of knowing, the knower and the known all coming together in one. So in the West, we have these ideas that God, man, and nature are separate, but in the East and some of these more ancient cultures, it's more that God, man, and nature are one. But somehow we've come to separate all those ideas. But this idea of direct cognition shows that we, like you're saying, is a microcosm of the macrocosm, and that while God geometrizes, if we begin to geometrize like God, it's like we are going to be able to achieve that direct cognition and that process, that deeper process of knowing. It's all so inspiring. I don't know if you heard recently about this dog that climbed to the top of the pyramids, and these guys were flying over with their paragliders, and they saw this dog was on top of one of the pyramids, and they videoed it. And it just like became this sensation on the internet. Who is this dog, and what's he doing at the top of the pyramids? And I think maybe that dog knows something more than we do. I was thinking of that great Yudhishthira. When he died, he would not enter heaven without bringing his dog with him, which is the dog of Dharma. But I don't know. That's a huge distraction. But I really got super inspired by this presentation, Kirk. You put a lot of time into it, and I hope we all can take from it what we can, and begin to look at the world in different and deeper ways, and enjoy the mystery of the world we live in, and the mystery of ourselves. So thank you, Kirk, for super inspiring talk.
Oh, thank you, Cliff. That was great. Very wonderful. I love that that prompt. I do hope that we can all look at the world in different and, alternative and even better ways than what we're just fed. I think a lot of what I've learned from the pyramids in school has been just kind of regurgitated information, and it's based in just one way of thought. And I think this conversation is inviting us all to think outside of the box. And so thank you so much, Kirk. I also feel very inspired and informed. And just like very quickly, I will say that I think it was Robert Moore who mentioned the Eye of Ra and Eye of Horus, and I have found myself really attracted to the symbol. I've never been one for tattoos until maybe last year, and I got my first tattoo, which is, I can't really see it very well, but an Eye of Horus. And I really love the contrast between the Eye of Horus and the Eye of Ra, because they are two different symbols. And the Eye of Horus being, but the Eye of Ra symbolizing the sun, and the Eye of Horus symbolizing the moon, and having this, feminine energy and protective energy against any kind of like negativity or maybe even spiritual warfare. And from what I know about the pyramids, outside of what Kirk has shared, is that there are tombs in these pyramids that have held bodies for longer than you could imagine, better than any kind of casket ever could. And I think there is something about the energy of protection around those pyramids. I'd love to go see the pyramids one day. And I feel very encouraged by this talk to do so. So thank you so much, Kurt. Sorry, I want to give you a chance to respond.
Well, I was just going to say that there was one, just in the last 10 years, there was one pyramid they discovered which had not been broken into and not been robbed. So it was still hermetically sealed. But they were able to enter it, and they made it to the interior chamber, and they found a sealed sarcophagus, which was all made out of this precious alabaster. And by the way, the sarcophagus in the Great Pyramid was not even was imported from some foreign land. It's not from Egypt. But in any case, they found this hermetically sealed pyramid, hermetically sealed room, hermetically sealed sarcophagus. They opened it, and what did they find? You would think there would be, you know, a skeleton in there. No, it was empty. And that's true of many of them, is that why aren't there remains in them? Why aren't there, you know, precious jewels? They didn't, that's the other thing. They didn't find, except for a few like bracelets in the pyramid, they didn't find any, you know, precious belongings or anything like you normally see in these elaborate. See, so that's the other thing that happened in later kingdoms. You had this sort of degrading of the whole idea of what the pyramid was about, and these elaborate tombs being built for pharaohs and so on. So, because that was a kind of it was almost like an attempt at physical immortality, but there's very esoteric sides to that as well. But it was a degrading of the original idea of the pyramid. At least that's the way I understand it. Anyway, I've gone on too long. Thank you all for your attention and time.
But maybe the pyramids were misappropriated at that time.
Right. Well, that's the other thing. If they're really that old, they could have been reused again and again for different purposes. So, yeah.
Very mysterious stuff. Yeah, I think I'll be thinking about this for a while. So, thank you so much, Kirk. And while I have you here, we will have gems next week. Actually, our very own Cliff Tillotson is going to be speaking on it's the theme, A Firm Grasp on Our Destiny. And Cliff will be speaking on the American transcendentalist tradition of Thoreau. So I'm looking forward to hearing more about that from Cliff. And I just want to give a warm mahalo to all of you for joining today's gems. And we'll see you next week.
Thanks, everyone.
If anyone wants to stay on and see the dog on the pyramid, I'll share that short video.
Excellent. I'll stop the recording now, but maybe we can share that. I saw this. Super cool. How did he get all the way up there?
I know.
That is an adventurous dog.
Yeah.
That's cool, man.
When they say a good dog, that's a good dog right there. And I know there's like ancient history that connects like dogs and cats.